I think there's lots of new moms, which is the primary demographic for this podcast, who are just don't even know how to talk about their beginning of their motherhood experience. And they're like, okay, it's fine, it's all fine. When they're like, they started their motherhood in just like this dumpster fire of the pandemic. So I just want to like normalize stories that started out really hard. And for people, because I think that hearing that, like, you're not alone is like the big, like the signpost that says, I can find peace and healing in my life. It's not like a path, it's not like the road, but it's just like the signpost that like, okay, it was different and it was really hard, but it's okay.
They say when a baby is born, so is a mother. But while you are there to help your baby grow into the person he or she is meant to be, who is there to help you? Many women feel lost and alone when they become mothers, wondering, who am I now? Sometimes it feels like the transformation from woman to mother is as radical as a caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly. Did you know that inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar literally turns into goop before it rearranges itself into a butterfly? This podcast is about the goop, what soul transformation looks like as you transition from being a woman to a mom. Your baby's growth matters, but yours does too. You're not alone. I'm your host, Brittany Ming. Welcome to the Motherhood Metamorphosis.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. I'm your host, Brittany Ming, and today we're talking to Sierra Buck. Sierra Buck is the mom to an absurdly good-natured baby, the owner of an unforgivably spoiled puppy, and a wife to the kindest man on earth. She is a budding writer who recently graduated with her MFA in Creative Nonfiction and has become a professional rejection letter recipient on her request to getting published. Because she became a mom while in grad school during the pandemic, she's basically a hermit and is going a little crazy. So that's the best bio ever. And I just love your writing because you're so tongue-in-cheek funny. And also, like, we all want to cry a little bit because we're like, I know, I get it too. So I wanted to have you on today to talk about becoming a mom during the pandemic and what your pregnancy was like and what giving birth was like and what your beginning of your motherhood journey has been like during these unprecedented times, as we all got so annoyed by hearing. But I think that these stories really matter, and I wanted to share your story here on the podcast. So tell us your pregnancy story and your birth story.
Oh gosh, yeah. Nothing about pregnancy was precedented. Mainly the fact we felt where we were ready to become parents. I was in school and he wanted to change careers, and we were living somewhere just very temporarily. We didn't have intentions to stay where we were. We had just gotten a puppy, and obviously COVID was happening. It was still within that first year of just, there wasn't a vaccine yet and people didn't know what to do, and you couldn't go anywhere. And we only ever saw my mom and my siblings who lived down the road from them at the time, and otherwise we were just in an isolation bubble. And then my mom caught COVID, and so we went into lockdown. This was in December of 2020, just like, we have to quarantine and make sure that we're not sick. And I started to feel bad, and I tend to be maybe like a little bit of a hypochondriac. Like, I just assume that the worst is happening to me at any given time. And so when I found out that she had COVID, I was like, well, I definitely have it, and I'm achy and I'm feeling kind of nauseous, and those aren't typical symptoms. But she didn't have typical symptoms at first either. And so after maybe 4 or 5 days of really not feeling well, I went and got a rapid test, and it came back negative. But they said, well, be careful because, you don't feel well, so you could still have it. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is crazy, but maybe let's just take a pregnancy test to be sure. And so I told my husband, Bryce, that I was going to take the pregnancy test, but it was probably nothing. And, don't even get worked up about it. And sure enough, it came back positive. And we just, I walked out of the bathroom and I set the pregnancy test on the coffee table next to where he was sitting. And I said, 2 lines means pregnant. And he looked at it, and he was playing a video game at the time, and he just paused the video game. He didn't say anything for about 20 minutes. It was just total silence of like, well, now what? We don't know what to do. So, after a couple of weeks, we sort of started to recover from like, just the shock of it, and started to think through what was I going to do, how was I going to finish school, could I get done in time, and I guess taking it one step at a time. But the thing that was really crazy about all of it, this was our first baby, so we didn't really know what the procedure was just normally, finding an OB and going, and Bryce was never allowed to go with me. He was able to come to the anatomy scan and maybe one other appointment, but otherwise, everything was so shut down. I had to go by myself, which isn't the end of the world. A lot of people go to the doctor by themselves, but it felt just so bizarre to be getting these updates on how baby's doing. He hadn't heard her heartbeat until, I don't know, we were mostly done with the pregnancy before he got to hear her heartbeat. And it just felt so like isolating that he wasn't getting to experience that journey with me. And then I did catch COVID. I'm trying to think. Yeah, in March of 2021, I was, I guess, like 4 or 5 months pregnant at that point, and I was having really severe chest pain. So we went to the hospital, and it turns out I just pulled a muscle, and it turns out that hurt really bad. Pulled chest muscle, thought I was dying, and then I think at the hospital I caught COVID. And so we just were living in so much fear then of, we didn't know how COVID would affect, Clementine is my daughter, in utero, and there wasn't information out about what would happen, to a pregnant person with COVID. Really, again, it was still all so new, and so they just had me like checking my blood oxygen levels just every 20 minutes for 2 weeks, and they did a growth scan. They said the only thing that they knew for sure could happen was that a lot of times, like, it seems like it was stunting the baby's growth when the mom had COVID while pregnant. So we were looking out for that, expecting her to be born really small. And again, all this time, I mean, we were just in isolation, and we went really back and forth on, do we have a baby shower? It doesn't feel appropriate. Do we have a gender reveal? None of that felt like things that we should do. It didn't feel safe to do. And, so it's, in that sense, sort of the community building of preparing for a baby. You're like, we wanted to do those things, but then, you start weighing up, was it worth it to, cut a piece of pink cake in a room full of people and then someone dies, It's just, you weigh the fun thing that you want to do against, the risk to the people around you. So we sort of went through the pregnancy by ourselves, and I was okay. I didn't have a very severe case of COVID, and she was okay too. Fortunately, I was able to get the vaccine shortly after that, and we felt comforted by the fact that she would sort of benefit from the vaccine, actually, because I was still pregnant when I got it. But we're getting towards the end of the pregnancy. They, maybe in the beginning of my 3rd trimester, they re-allowed. It had been locked down to just one person could attend the birth, with one support person, and that was obviously going to be my husband. But we really wanted my sister Savannah there with us. And so around the beginning of my 3rd trimester, they said, okay, you can have 2 support people again. And we were so relieved, because we had just been sort of banking on that hopefully happening the whole time. We joked that our birth plan was Savannah, as a labor and delivery nurse. If they had a medical question, I was just gonna, let her make those decisions. I didn't want to have an opinion. I didn't want to have a plan. I just wanted her there. And so when they said that we could have the 2 people, we were so relieved. And so we got to the end of the pregnancy thinking like, okay, Van's going to be there and it's going to be fine. And then I had an appointment with my OB 2 days before Clementine was due, and my blood pressure was high. And so they sent me to the hospital just for some testing. And while we were there, they told us, oh yeah, starting midnight tonight, it's just one support person again. Oh. And we're like, she's due any day. We don't know what we're going to do. Our whole, again, like, the medical staff is there to help you, but the whole plan was for Savannah to, just be there to support us. And so we just felt like, oh, can we be induced right now? And they were like, no, you have to go home. Your blood pressure's fine. Uh, so, so they sent me home. And then the day after my due date, I got induced. We went to the hospital, just me and Bryce. Savannah had come back from the West Coast. She had driven all the way back from Washington State to be with me, and then just waved goodbye as we drove to the hospital. And again, you want to like keep in mind, lots of people do hard things all the time. It wasn't the end of the world that my sister couldn't be there, but it felt unfair. It seems like a spoiled thing to say, but I wanted her there. She's a person who has always been like my support and a comfort to me. And I trust her implicitly. So knowing that if she was there and looking out for me, if I didn't know what to say or what to do in terms of like how to handle just the medical aspect of having a baby, she was going to be able to handle that for me. And so going into the situation, just feeling like we hadn't made a plan, and then we didn't have that support anymore, was a little alarming. And then my delivery, I would say, was somewhat traumatic, and I don't know if Savannah being there would have helped or not. The long and short of it is that Clementine was not stunted. Her growth was not stunted by me having COVID. She was 10 pounds and 1 ounce. She was just fine. She was actually a little too good. She got stuck during delivery, and so we things were, I pushed for 3 hours, and it was taking so long, and the midwife started asking questions about like, do we have an idea of how big the baby was? And I just was not picking up what she was putting down. She was trying to warn me like, this is a big baby, and I was like, I don't know, yeah, I have no idea. And yeah, so then when she got stuck, we just didn't know what was happening. It was me and the midwife and the nurse and Bryce, and I was pushing, and then I had my eyes closed, and then I opened my eyes, and suddenly there were like 20 people I had never seen before in the room. And it was, when you have a baby, it's surreal. You don't know what's happening. Time ceases to exist. You just sort of want to also not exist, not be dead, but just not exist.
I want to leave my body now. I just want to leave. Take a vacation.
Yeah. Give me 15 minutes of not excruciating pain, and I'll be back.
Yeah.
So I just, all of a sudden there are all these people here, and then the midwife is yelling at me. She had been encouraging me to push before, and suddenly she was yelling at me to push. And she says, I need someone up on the table. And so this woman I've never seen before like jumps up around the bed, and she jumps on the bed, and she's pushing down on me. And again, it's all within like the medical procedure. They were resolving the emergency, and they were supposed to be doing that, but it was so disorienting and confusing, and not knowing what was happening. And again, I think my midwife really wanted to protect me from sort of the scary aspect of what was happening. They hadn't been totally upfront with me that my blood pressure was elevated to the level of being considered mild preeclampsia, and they didn't tell me. I kind of overheard someone talking about it and was like, wait, oh, that's bad though, right? I wanted to know what was happening to my body, and they weren't really telling me. And then after the delivery, she stitched me back up and then was like, okay, y'all have a good night. And I was like, wait, what happened? I'd not seen a lot of babies be born, 1 or 2, but I hadn't seen that before. That didn't seem normal. And so, she explained to us that Clementine's shoulder had gotten stuck on my like my pelvis and my pubic bone, and that had been sort of the emergency, is that they needed to resolve that situation in 60 seconds, and it had taken 63, but probably there wasn't any brain damage. And anyway, and I just felt so, I keep saying the word isolated, but just alone, right? Like that I didn't have my advocate there with me, and I had to push with a mask on. I felt so raw and so other to myself, and that was just the beginning of a very long journey of like not knowing who I was, like physically, my body, and I'm sure you can relate to after you have a baby and you look in the mirror and you're like, there is a fat lumpy stranger where I used to be, and I'm sure she's nice, but I don't know this body. This isn't me. And it can be me, and I'm working on sort of refamiliarizing myself, but nothing feels the way that it used to feel. And so for your body to just be strange and to be unaware of what's happening and to feel like, if I had just had Savannah here, I would know what was happening because she would get the truth.
Yes. Yeah. So how long did you stay in the hospital after you gave birth?
I didn't have to stay too long. I think we were there 2 nights. Clementine was born like right after midnight on the 23rd. And so I think we left the 25th.
Okay. And what month was she born?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, August.
August. Okay.
Of 2021.
August of 2021. Okay. Yeah, I think that as I'm listening to you talk about all these different things, the thread that I'm hearing is that was hard, but other people have gone through hard things and it was hard not to have the baby shower. And I really wanted to have Savannah there. And I'm just hearing like loss after loss after loss for you of like what the dream of this pregnancy, your first pregnancy, like could have been like that, like COVID took away. And I think that as a first time mom, you just don't know what to expect. Like I knew I didn't with my first kids, and you didn't, it was only with like my subsequent pregnancies where I was like, oh, that was different. Or like that could have been like, I didn't know that wasn't normal, especially since my first were twins. Like that was a whole dynamic. But I think for women who are having their first baby, like 2020, 2021, those women are having completely different experiences than women who had babies in 2019. You don't even know how to normalize your own experience because this is your normal. But I think that there's like that sense of loss because you think, oh, all those joyful, fun parts of pregnancy, like the gender reveal and the baby shower and your husband coming or partner coming to the appointment with you and like hearing the heartbeat and sharing those moments, like that is not there. So even if it's like something that was normal for you during this pregnancy, it was still a loss. Does that resonate with you?
No, it absolutely does. That the precedent had been set for what pregnancy is supposed to be, the good parts of it. I had all of the morning sickness and the every aspect of feeling terrible that comes with pregnancy. That was all still there, but then the fun, social, celebratory aspects were changed or taken away, or a shadow of what they could have been. We did a little, with the gender reveal, we did a little cake cutting with my family, and then my husband just went to see his parents and told them. I didn't even go with him. So we're like, oh, go tell them it's a girl, and it's like, that's not what we wanted that to be. We wanted it to be just a big gathering of people being excited with us, and it couldn't be that. So
Yeah. I think that the pandemic was a lot of keep calm or keep strong and carry on. And I think that there's this act of retrospect where we look back and we're like, wait a minute, like that was really hard, like, or that was really sad, or that really wasn't what I wanted it to be. But there's like no way to go back and be like, I can go back and redo that pregnancy. Like there's no going back and redoing the pregnancy to get the good parts. Like there's only looking back and saying like, oh, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I liked what you're saying about how other people go through hard things. And like, I think that's a good perspective to have. But I think you can also hold the perspectives of saying, I can do hard things. And that really hurt. Like when I was going through that, like that was painful. And I think that's like almost the beginning part of motherhood of saying, like, this was hard and I'm strong. And it also really, really sucked. And I'm changed because of it. So who do you feel like tell me about like feeling lost, or we kind of touched on this a little bit, but like a time of transition or grief for you. Do you feel like that was part of your journey during pregnancy or maybe postpartum?
yeah, I think probably for me it was more postpartum than pregnancy. So much of my pregnancy was kind of a blur. I was working, and I was trying to just take as many classes as I could to get through as much school as I could before she was born. And so it was just this race against the clock to just, get through school and then have the baby, and get through school and have the baby. And then we had the baby. And shortly after she was born, my husband and I moved states, 3 weeks postpartum. And then suddenly I didn't have my family anymore. We had just sort of decided during the pandemic and during our pregnancy that our bubble was us and my family, who was right down the road. And those were the people that we could see and feel safe seeing. And then suddenly, we moved 2 hours away, and then it was just us. It's just us and this new baby. And, we didn't feel like we could have people come visit and meet her. That would be ridiculous and unsafe. We couldn't have people visit and bring us food, because even then, we had just moved far away from even the people that we did know. So it's not like people could just leave something on our porch. No one's going to drive 2 hours with a casserole. So all of a sudden, we were just alone and not able to travel those distances or, bridge them because it wasn't wise or it wasn't safe. And so then, my husband started a new job, and then it was just me and the baby. and it was a lot. I didn't feel like I could join, I feel like there's like new mom groups and, those exist online, and I did try to plug in virtually, but, it's not the same. And I think that's something that we all feel so deeply just through the course of the pandemic. You can do a virtual happy hour or, a virtual birthday party, and you're like, those kind of suck,
I know. It's like, I now have an aversion to the word virtual anything. And you're like, I can't do it. Nope.
No. And the baby and the dog and the, the grocery delivery guy every once in a while. I was seeing at the door. That was my whole world.
Yeah. So was that an intense time for you when you look back on that, which it really was not long ago because Clementine is going to be 1 in August, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you look back at brand new mom, Sierra, what do you think when you look back at that woman?
Ooh. She's a hot mess. And I still am, but I was struggling a lot more than I realized that I was. I know that my doctor was doing the best they could. They would give like the little postpartum survey, do you no longer know what joy feels like? And I was like, well, no, I still feel some happiness. I'm not just, and I know some women don't, right? Some people really do go to the full end of the extreme with postpartum depression, and you don't feel joy anymore, and you feel a lot of despair. And I wasn't there, but I had so much anxiety, and I should have anticipated this probably as a person who does just already have anxiety. The question on the little questionnaire at the office was, are you anxious for no reason? And I was like, well, no, I have reasons. I'm anxious because
I have lots of reasons.
I can't step outside the door without worrying that the neighbor's gonna like cough in my baby's general direction. And my washer and dryer in my apartment is right outside my bedroom door. And if that caught on fire during the night, then what would I do? And I just lay in bed at night thinking about like, how would I escape a fire? And it's not going to catch on fire. The dryer's not on. Like, it's fine. But it wasn't fine. And I was sort of spiraling out of control. And oh my gosh, people ask like, oh, how was it to be a young mom and you weren't sleeping? And how was your baby? And Clementine sleeps like a dream. That baby sleeps so well. You would not believe. I have so much privilege in a good, like a napping baby. I know that I do. And it was wasted on me. I was awake. I was awake, just riddled with fear about what was going to happen and what could go wrong. And, nothing was safe. And I had to protect her, and I literally couldn't. And she doesn't have an immune system and be awake through the night. I mean, I oftentimes didn't fall asleep until, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm laying next to my perfectly sleeping, sound asleep baby. It wasn't until recently, I started to balance back out maybe around when she was 4 or 5 months old. I started to hit maybe a more normal level of anxiety, back to what I was used to dealing with.
Just like normal anxiety, not like post-baby pandemic anxiety.
Yeah. That low-lying, worry. When you think about dumb things you said and stuff, I can live with that. But I was talking to Savannah over the phone about just sort of what those first few months have been like. And she was saying, like, I had no idea it was that bad. Here, if I had known, I would have encouraged you to get, like, see someone about it and get medicated. I didn't know that you were struggling that much. That's not a normal level to struggle. And I just, in that moment when she said that, felt so, again, just alone and bereaved that I didn't realize that wasn't normal. And I wasn't seeing anyone except for my husband, who also has never had a baby before, doesn't know what normal postpartum anxiety looks like. And so we just sort of said, like, we have been living in this just fear-riddled hellscape in my own mind, and I drug him into it with me, bless his heart. We could have been doing something about it, but we didn't have the people around us to say, that's not normal.
Yeah.
You should be worried about that.
I feel like that's such an honest narrative to share, because we often do not know what's normal until we share. And like Savannah, like validating that for you, it's like it didn't fix the problem, but it let you know, like, okay, like I could have had a different experience, even if I can't go back. Like, even like you can't go back and re experience a pregnancy, you can't go back and re experience your beginning months of motherhood. But it's almost like saying, there is a different way to be that is more full of light than what you were in,
Mm,
and a way to say, I can do this motherhood, this life differently, and it can be more of a deep breath as opposed to like a clenched stomach, if that makes sense.
yeah. Yes. No, that's very good.
So I'm thinking about like people who are listening right now. And if you are feeling that clenched stomach like all the time, like there is a different way to be. And if you're filling out the postpartum questionnaire even now and they're like, are you anxious for no reason? It'd be like, well, maybe you could even write in the margin, there are reasons, but yes.
Yeah.
I filled those out with my daughter, and I have 5 kids, and she's my first child who I ever had those questionnaires with. And if I had filled those out with my twins, there would have been crying excessively, check. Like there would have been all those things, but nobody asked any of those questions. And I did remember thinking, like, wow, this is such a great resource. As much as you don't want to be the person to be like, yes, I am crying excessively. No, I'm not sleeping at all. Yes, there are reasons for my anxiety, but it is a
Yeah.
little out of control.
Yeah.
I was thankful for that resource, even if you think, I don't want to be that person. You know, I think that new moms always want to be okay. And I was like an old mom. I'm like a 5 timer, and I wanted to be okay. But I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to take care of these kids, like the best way I can do that is take care of myself. And that comes with like this gut level honesty of like checking the damn square on the postpartum pediatrician checklist that you're just like, it's coming. And I just have to fill it out. But the fact that there are resources that are now in place does give me a measure of hope for better postpartum care in America, even if we've have such a long way to go.
Yes, long way to go. But even just starting those conversations, and I feel like I've gotten to do that a little bit with just people that I know who have also had babies. That a friend of mine from college was really struggling, and she was like, "I feel like I've made a mistake. I cry all the time, and I'm not happy, and I wasn't expecting this." And I was
Mm,
like, well, I don't want to say that it's normal to cry all of the time, but you're not, the world's worst mom because you can't stop crying. A lot of people can't, and you should
yeah,
see a doctor for sure,
yeah,
but it's not cut out to be a mom because all of a sudden you just feel like the world's biggest train wreck. Like that happens. It's crazy how many people I think sugarcoat, unintentionally sugarcoat, I think, what postpartum days look like, and even what delivery looks like. I was not ready for having a baby, so I think it's because people don't want to scare you, and then you're like, you kind of needed to scare me a little. I wasn't ready.
needed to be a tiny bit scared, but you
Yeah.
also didn't. Like, I don't know, it's so hard to be like, don't be the person who tells horror stories, but also like, this is going to be, you're really going to change your life. Like, this is going to be that pivotal moment, even more than like getting married or having sex for the first time, or like whatever like the big life changer is, like moving across the country. Like having a baby is like body soul altering.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times it can leave you obviously in pain and healing, but also pain and healing on your inside, in your heart, and wondering, oh my gosh, like now I'm completely changed. And like you said, looking in the mirror and being like, I don't recognize this person. And for you, was it, I don't recognize who I see physically, but was it also, I don't recognize who I am as a changed woman on the inside? Was that something that also was the case for you?
Oh my gosh, so much. You were joking about like wishing like you could just be outside of your body when you're giving birth, but I kind of felt like giving birth did, launch my consciousness outside of my body, and I didn't know how to get back into it.
Mm,
And like I just felt like this big emptiness, and so much of that was the anxiety, in hindsight, but that I just didn't know how to be anymore. And there's so much of it that is just for the first time you're thinking about another human being and their well-being more than your own. We're just like every breath in and breath out, just Clementine was on my mind at all times. And sort of the exhaustion of that, and just not realizing like how much you have to split your mind to care for another person that extensively and always be thinking of them. But then so much of it too was just, the physical devastation for me, with a a 10-pound baby. My body was not prepared for that, and it was a long recovery. I had someone recently ask me like, how long did it take you to get back to feeling like yourself? And I lied and said 6 months, but the answer is I don't feel like myself still. Like I don't, and she was like, that's a long time. And I was like, yeah, probably could be longer too, though, so just keep that in
Oh
mind.
my gosh. I was chatting with an older mom friend and she was saying that she was talking to this young woman who was about to have her first baby and was very, very nervous about becoming a parent. Like didn't know if she wanted to have kids. Her husband kind of was like, "We can do this." And she was like, "Okay." So she was about to have her first kid and she's like, "I don't know if I can deal with the sleep deprivation. I mean, 2 whole weeks." And this older mom friend was like, "Oh, yeah, it's rough." And then we were like, "Oh, did you break her heart?" And she's like, "No, I did not." She's like,
Oh, that's cute.
she will figure it out on her own.
Yeah.
But it's like we don't want to devastate new moms and like break their hearts, but it's like, okay, you're about to go onto this path that's going to look wild and unknown and it's going to be like kind of brutal. So hopefully her baby was a sleeping baby like Clementine, but
Yeah.
that's not always the case. Most babies are not sleeping babies.
No.
So
And that,
Clementine's a little roly-poly champ of a sleeper.
she is. And I realized that again with sort of keeping that perspective of a lot of people have it harder. That's sort of been my journey along the way of, I was really struggling and my kid was so chill. And I just knew that like I was really blessed to have such a mellow baby, because if I had a baby who was handling life as poorly as I was handling it, I don't know that we would have just been able to continue. I would have, crawled back home and knocked on my mother's door, like, let me back in. I can't do it by myself,
I think that's really good to, I just want to affirm what you said to be like, you can have a really great baby and still a really tough postpartum experience. And the fact that you acknowledge that, and some people might say, oh, I shouldn't have anything to complain about. Like my baby was a sleeper and they were cuddle bug and they smiled all the time, but like I still struggle. Like, why am I struggling? You're struggling because like you were born at the same time as she was. And like you are like the tiny little baby mother who is growing into like yourself. And that's a freaking hard transition to make. So I just want to affirm that for you that even though she was a great baby, like you're allowed to struggle. And it doesn't negate like or say like, oh, my struggle isn't valid because somehow she was a quote unquote good baby. So it can still be your postpartum journey can still be really tough.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
need to remind myself that, because it's hard to feel like I'm coming unglued and I don't have a good reason to. But the reason to is like every part of my body, physically, mentally, emotionally, my brain chemistry, nothing was the same. And then they said, all right, get back up on your feet and get back at it. Enjoy being a mom.
Yeah. I don't know if you've listened to some of the other episodes where people talk about like the big transition of motherhood. And most people, we've had several conversations where people say it took 2 years to feel like yourself again. And then I remember another article that I published on my website where somebody wrote, coming out of the fog is when your youngest child is potty trained. And so that's usually around 3. So if you think, okay, 2 to 3 years, because each time you have a baby, you go through another transformation of yourself because, you new human in the world and you also are like being born into a new self as your mother. So I just really appreciated that article she wrote. But at the same time, it's like that daunting aspect of like, oh, how much can I feel this huge transition for 2 more years? But the fact is, like, you only have to live one day of it at a time. So kind of pull back from like the big, huge view and be like, okay, just today, I'm going to like live this life. Even if I feel weird, I don't feel like myself, I'm crying all day. Like each day you're doing it and it's going to get better. That's my little pep talk for you and for other new moms, since I'm a 5-time mom. But like my daughter is 3 now and she's potty trained, and I feel like that is true because I'm just like being like, okay, here is the transition. Like here is this, but it was really rough with her too. So that was it. I felt very unmoored. And she was my 5th kid. So it's not like you arrive. You
Yeah.
just kind of like keep transforming through this process. So one of my questions is, when did you start feeling like you again? But I think that's not the right question to ask.
I know it's hard because you're like, well, I will never be pre-baby me ever again. I look back at, and again, that was not that long ago for me. I can remember what it felt like and what my thoughts were like to be, on the before the baby. A much further journey back in your memory, but
Yeah.
I remember this outlook on life that I had, and I can't have that again. And I don't know that I want to. For all of the ways that postpartum was really, really difficult, and having a baby without community was really, really difficult because of the pandemic, all of that. She also just makes my life so much richer and more beautiful and more lovely. And so, I think that there's a real suffering component, but there's also just this incredible joy, and it's like a pleasure to carry the burden of worry for her, but it also, medication's probably not a bad idea. Just take some of the edge off of that worry. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that maybe, I mean, it depends on everybody's brain chemistry, but I think for moms who did have kids during the pandemic, I think there's like a completely added dynamic because you're worried about sickness and you're worried about integration. And I think things are getting a lot better. So for women who are pregnant now, it's not the same experience as women who had babies during 2020 and 2021. This was a unique time in history to become a mother, and like keeping your finger on the pulse of that trauma, because I would totally classify it as a trauma, is going to reverberate not just in your early motherhood. I think if you have another kid, I mean, Clementine might be your one and only golden child, but for anybody, if you have another child after this, it's going to come up again. Like when your husband goes with you and hears the heartbeat for the first time, if he goes to every single appointment, you're going to think back and be like, oh, I wish she would have been able to come with me to those other appointments. And when you have the gender reveal and the baby shower and all your friends and family are around you, you're going to feel that ache again. And and then when you birth with like your mom and sister and aunt and everybody else in the room and there's no mask and you push your baby out in like 5 minutes and you're going to be like, that was amazing. I wish it could have been like that with my other birth. And I think because I've had those experiences, not like this, but like I've had experiences, and like that's like it's a grieving process because you didn't know how hard it was in the past, and then you realize how it could be different, and that's normal. It's normal to like just want to normalize that, but it would come up. It'll come up again.
Yeah.
So that's just life, and the grief of like talking about it and like working through those feelings is what's going to bring healing, as opposed to saying like, oh, it wasn't that bad, or like it didn't affect me, because I think it does affect moms because having a baby is such a transformational process. And I think those 2 years of birthing and becoming new mothers are going to have like those reverberating effect into the future for motherhood, but not insurmountable and not something that's going to damage or prevent you from having a beautiful relationship with your kids or even a beautiful relationship with yourself. It just means it was hard at the beginning. So I don't know if that resonates with you a lot, but I just wanted to have that perspective.
Yeah, no, that does resonate. That sort of, it was hard, but it will be okay. That it's going to shape, but not control maybe the way that my story unfolds.
Yeah.
But that would be an element of it, but not the dictating, driving force.
Yeah. Well, to end our time, I like to ask these 10 rapid fire questions that are just for fun, and I'm excited to hear your answers. And I'll have to compare them to Savannah's. So, for anybody listening, Savannah, I did an interview with her at the beginning of this season. So if you want to go back, this is her sister. So we talked about Savannah a lot. And so her episode is super good. I hope you guys can go back to listen to that. But yes, rapid fire. Which Disney princess would you want to take out to coffee?
Mulan.
Mulan. I don't know if anybody said Mulan, but she's a total badass. I would like to go out to coffee with her. What's one thing you must have on your nightstand?
Lotion.
Go-to treat after Clementine goes to bed.
Jesus.
An ordinary moment that brings you great joy.
Probably, honestly, waking up in the morning, and this circles back to, my happy baby. Clementine wakes up smiling. She will pop into a sitting position and smile, and it is my favorite part of every day. I'm not a morning person, but to pry one crusty eye open and just see her beaming in my face is a great way to start the day.
I love that. I think there's just something wonderful about getting a baby up, and then they're so happy to see you. It's very different when your kids are teenagers. Like, they're not so happy to see you. So that is a very joyful moment of, the happy baby. I love that. The last show you binged and loved.
Oh man. Our Flag Means Death. I think I've watched it 3 times.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. If you run out of this besides milk, you have to go to the store.
Mayonnaise.
We haven't had mayonnaise on as an answer. That's great. Who makes you laugh?
My husband.
I think you would make yourself laugh too, because you're super funny. I love reading your posts on Facebook. I'm just like,
Thank you.
She is hilarious. When you were 5 years old, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh God. Okay. I wanted to drive the street sweeper truck. That was so fun.
You're like, that is the dream.
That's the dream.
That's a really cool vehicle though, and you get to clean up the street. Everybody moves out of the way for you. I mean,
it looks like fun. It looks like
cool.
I guess being in it probably isn't that fun, but when it went by, it was so cool.
Yeah, you're like, I want to watch. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. What are you looking forward to?
I am looking forward to sort of this next season of life. Circling back to Savannah, she and her husband are getting ready to move to Greenville, and I am so excited for them to be here and for Clementine to be close to her cousins, and just Clementine being a baby, when with the pandemic, we've not had a lot of access to kid spaces. She wasn't big enough to enjoy them, and they did feel that safe to enter into. But as things are sort of getting easier, and Edmund and Eloise are a little older, we're excited to go to the park together and just be in spaces where kids have freedom and can sort of grow, and for her to have that company to do it in. I'm so excited for it.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm really excited for you guys. All right, last one. Finish this sentence. Motherhood is.
The first word that popped into my head, to be totally honest, was brutal. But not just brutal. It's a lot of things. It can be a little brutal.
I think that's honest, and I appreciate your honesty. I'm so glad we got to talk today. I think I leaned a little heavy in on the advice, which I don't usually do. So I'm sorry if I felt like I was preaching at you.
No, I am soaking it up. I'm really grateful for it, and I'm gonna write a lot of it on a mirror that I look in every day and just sort of remember and bask in it. So thank you for sharing. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Next, tell your friends. Podcasts are a slow growth type of social media, so promo works best when it's from person to person. If you know another mom who's in the goop right now, send her a text of encouragement and the link to the episode that is speaking to your heart right now. If you have a story about your own matrescence, the physical, emotional, hormonal, and social transition that occurs when someone becomes a mother, please leave a comment below. I want this channel to be a place where women can build community about the challenges and joys of their own motherhood metamorphosis. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope it encouraged you and gave you some good food for thought. If you ever have any questions, comments, or you'd like to reach out to me personally, you can email me at brittanyaming@gmail.com.
Here we go. Okay. Whew. We almost recorded the whole podcast we were doing the whole podcast without recording. Be like, oh, that was fun. Not if it's recorded. Oh man. Okay. All right. We're good. We're good. We're good. Sierra is the mom of an absurdly, sorry, let me start over again. I can't read.